Mr. President, thank you very much for agreeing to speak with us.
You're most welcome in Damascus.
Well, we start with Aleppo, of course. Aleppo is now seeing what is perhaps the most fierce fighting since the war started almost 6 years ago here in Syria. But the Western politicians and Western media have been largely negative about your army's advance. Why do you think this is happening? Do they take it as their own defeat?
Actually, after they failed in Damascus, because the whole narrative was about liberating Damascus from the state during the first 3 years. When they failed, they moved to Homs. When they moved in Homs, they moved to Aleppo. They focused on Aleppo during the last 3 years. And for them, this is the last most important card they could have played on the Syrian battlefield. Of course, they still have terrorists in different areas in Syria. But it's not like talking about Aleppo as the second largest city, which has the political, military, economic, and even moral sense when their terrorists are defeated. So for them, the defeat of the terrorists is the defeating of their proxies, to talk bluntly. These are their proxies, and for them, the defeat of the terrorists is the defeat of the country that provide them, whether regional countries or Western countries like the United States, first of all the United States and France and UK.
So you think they take it as their own defeat, right?
Exactly, that's what I mean. The defeat of the terrorists, this is their own defeat because these are their real army on the ground. They didn't interfere in Syria or intervened directly. They have intervened through those proxies. So that's how we have to look at it if we want to be realistic, regardless of their statements, of course.
Palmyra is in another troubled region now, and it's now taken by ISIS or ISIL. But we don't hear a lot of condemnation about it. Is that because of the same reason?
Exactly, because if it was captured by the government, they will be worried about the heritage. If we liberate Aleppo from the terrorists, there would be, the Western officials and the mainstream media, they're going to be worried about the civilians. They're not worried when the opposite happens, when the terrorists killing those civilians or attacking Palmyra and started destroying the human heritage, not only the Syrian heritage. Exactly, you are right, because ISIS, if you look at the timing of the attack, is related to what's happening in Aleppo. This is the response to what's happening in Aleppo, the advancement of the Syrian Arab army, and they wanted to make this, or let's say, to undermine the victory in Aleppo, and at the same time to distract the Syrian army from Aleppo to make it move toward Palmyra and stop the advancement. But of course, it didn't work.
We also hear reports that Palmyra siege was not only related to Aleppo battle, but also to what was happening in Iraq. And there are reports that the US-led coalition, which is almost 70 countries, allowed ISIL fighters in Mosul, in Iraq, leave, and that strengthened ISIL here in Syria. Do you think it could be the case?
It could be, but this is only to wash the hand of the American politicians from their responsibility on the attack. When they say just because of Mosul, of course, the Iraqi army attacked Mosul and ISIS left Mosul to Syria. That's not the case. Why? Because they came with different and the huge manpower and firepower that ISIS never had before during this army, and they attacked on a huge front, tens of kilometers, that it could be a front of armies. ISIS could only have done that with the support of states, not states. They came with different machine guns, cannons, artillery, everything is different. So it could only happen when they come in this desert with the supervision of the American alliance that supposed to attack them in Al-Raqqa and Mosul and Deir Zor, but that it didn't happen. They turned a blind eye on what ISIS is going to do, and that's what I believe, they push them toward Palmyra. So it's not about Mosul. We don't have to fall in that trap. It's about Raqqa and Deir Zor. They are very close, only a few hundred kilometers. They could come under the supervision of the American satellites and the American drones and the American support.
How strong ISIS is today?
As strong as the support that they get from the West and the regional power. Actually, they're not strong for, if you talk about isolated case, ISIS as isolated case, they're not strong because they don't have the natural social incubator. Without it, terrorists cannot be strong enough. But the real support they have, the money, the oil field investment, the support of the American allies aircraft, that's why they are strong. So they are as strong as their supporters or as their supervisors.
In Aleppo, we heard that you allowed some of these terrorists leave freely the battleground. Why would you do that? It's clear that they can go back to, let's say, Idlib and get arms and ready for further attacks and maybe attack those liberating Aleppo.
Exactly. That's correct, and that's been happening for the last few years. But you always have things to lose and things to gain, and when the gain is more than what you lose, you go for that gain. In that case, our priority is to protect the area from being destroyed because of the war, to protect the civilians who live there, to give the chance for those civilians to leave through the open gates, to leave that area to the areas under the control of the government, and to give the chance to those terrorists to change their minds, to join the government, to go back to their normal life, and to get amnesty. When they don't, they can live with their armaments, with the loss or the disadvantage that you mentioned, but this is not our priority, because if you fight them in any other area outside the cities, you're going to have less destruction and less civilian casualties. That's why.
I feel that you call them terrorists, but at the same time you treat them as human beings. You tell them you have a chance to go back to your normal life.
Exactly. They are terrorists because they are holding machine gun, they kill, they destroy, they commit vandalism, and so on. And that's natural everywhere in the world. That's called as terrorism. But at the same time, they are human who are committed terrorism. They could be something else. They join the terrorists for different reasons, either out of fear, for the money, sometimes for the ideology. So if you can bring them back to their normal life to be natural citizens, that's your job there as a government. It's not enough to say we're going to fight terrorists. Fighting terrorists is like a video game. You can destroy your enemy in the video game, but the video game will generate and regenerate thousands of enemies. So you cannot deal with it on the American way, just killing. This is not our goal. This is the last option you have. If you can change, this is a good option. And it succeeded. It succeeded because many of those terrorists, when they changed their position, some of them living normal life, and some of them joined the Syrian army. They fought with the Syrian army against the other terrorists. This is success from our point of view.
Mr. President, you just said that you gain and you lose.
Yeah.
Do you feel you've done enough to minimize civilian casualties during this conflict?
We do our utmost. What's enough, this is subjective. Each one could look at it in his own way. At the end, what's enough is what you can do. My ability as a person, the ability of the government, the ability of Syria as a small country to face a war that's been supported by tens of countries, mainstream medias, hundreds of channels and other machines working against you. So it depends on the definition of enough. So this is, as I said, very subjective, but I'm sure that we are doing our best. Nothing is enough at the end, and the human practice is always full of correct and flaws, or mistakes, let's say, and that's a natural thing.
We hear Western powers asking Russia and Iran repeatedly to put pressure on you to, as they put it, stop the violence. And just recently, 6 Western nations, in an unprecedented message, they asked Russia and Iran again to put pressure on you, asking for a ceasefire in Aleppo.
Yeah.
Will you go for it? At the time when your army was progressing, they were asking for a ceasefire.
It's always important in politics to read between the lines, not to be literal. It doesn't matter what they ask. The translation of their statement is for Russia, please stop the advancement of the Syrian army against the terrorists. That's the meaning of that statement. Forget about the rest. You went too far in defeating the terrorists. That shouldn't happen. You should tell the Syrians to stop this. We have to keep the terrorists and to save them. This is in brief. Second, Russia never, these days, I mean, during this war, before that war, during the Soviet Union, never tried to interfere in our decision till that moment. Whenever they had opinion or advice, doesn't matter how we can look at it, they say at the end, this is your country, you know what the best decision you want to take. This is how we see it, but if you see it in a different way, you know, you are the Syrian. They are realistic and they respect our sovereignty, and they always defend the sovereignty that's based on the international law and the Charter of the United Nations. So it never happened that they made any pressure, and they will never do it. This is not their methodology.
How strong is the Syrian army today?
It's about the comparison to two things. First of all, the war itself. Second, to the size of Syria. Syria is not a great country, so it cannot have a great army in the numerical sense. The support of our allies was very important. Russia, mainly Russia, and Iran. After 6 years, or nearly 6 years of the war, which is longer than the First World War and the Second World War, is definitely and self-evident that the Syrian army is not to be as strong as it was before that. But what we have is the determination to defend our country. This is the most important thing. We lost so many lives in our army. We have so many martyrs, so many disabled soldiers. We lost so many of our equipments. Numerically, we lost a lot, but we still have this determination, and I can tell you this determination is much stronger than before the war. But of course, we cannot ignore the support from Russia. We cannot ignore the support from Iran that make this determination more effective and efficient, let's say.
President Obama has lifted a ban on arming some Syrian rebels just recently.
Yeah.
What impact do you think could it have on the situation on the ground? And could it directly or indirectly provide a boost to terrorists?
We're not sure that he left that embargo when he announced it. Maybe he left it before, but he announced it later just to give it the political legitimacy, let's say. This is first. Second point, which is very important, the timing of the announcement and the timing of attacking Palmyra, there's a direct link between these two. So the question, who are they going, those armaments, who are they going to? In the hands of who? In the hand of ISIS and al-Nusra. And there's coordination between ISIS and al-Nusra. So the announcement of this lifting of that embargo is related directly to the attack on Palmyra and to the support of other terrorists outside Aleppo, because when they are defeated in Aleppo, the United States and the way they need to support their proxies somewhere else, because they don't have any interest in solving the conflicts in Syria. So the crux of that announcement is to create more chaos, because the United States create chaos in order to manage this chaos. And when they manage this chaos, they wanted to use the different factors in that chaos in order to exploit the different parties of the conflict, whether they are internal parties or external parties.
Mr. President, how do you feel about being a small country in the middle of this tornado of countries not interested in ending the war here?
Exactly. It's something we've felt. We've always felt before this war, but we felt it more, of course, today, because small countries feel safer when there's international balance. And we felt the same, what you just mentioned, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when there was only American hegemony, and they wanted to implement whatever they want and to dictate all their policies on everyone. Small countries suffer the most. So we feel it today, but at the same time, today there's more balance with the Russian rule. That's why I think we always think the more Russia is stronger. I'm not only talking about Syria, I'm talking about every small country in the world. Whenever there's stronger Russia, more rising China, we feel more secure. It's painful, I would say it's very painful, this situation that we've been living on every level, a humanitarian level, the feeling, the loss, everything. But at the end, it's not about losing and winning. It's about either winning or losing your country. It's existential threat for Syria. It's not about government losing against other government or army against army. Either the country will win or the country will disappear. That's how we look at it. That's why you don't have time to feel that pain. You only have time to fight and defend and do something on the ground.
Let's talk about media's role in this conflict.
Yeah.
All sides during this war have been accused of civilian casualties, but the Western media has been almost completely silent about the atrocities committed by the rebels. What role is the media playing here?
First of all, the mainstream media, with their fellows politicians, they are suffering during the last few decades from moral decay. So they have no morals. Whatever they talk about, whatever they mention or they use as mask, human rights, civilians, children, they use all these just for their own political agenda in order to provoke the feelings of their public opinion to support them in their intervention in this region, whether military or political. So they don't have any credibility regarding them. If we want to look at what's happening in the United States is a rebellion against the mainstream media, because they've been lying and they kept lying on their audiences. We can tell that the public opinion or the people in the West doesn't know the real story in our region, but at least they know that the mainstream media and their politicians were lying to them for their own vested interest agenda and vested interest politicians. That's why I don't think the mainstream media could sell their stories anymore, and that's why they are fighting for their existence in the West, although they have a huge experience and a huge support and money and resources, but they don't have something very important for them to survive, which is the credibility. They don't have it, they lost it. They don't have the transparency. That's why they don't have credibility. That's why they are very coward today. They are afraid from your channel, from any statement that could tell the truth, because it's going to debunk their cause. That's why.
Another example, Reuters news agency has been quoting Amaq, ISIL's mouthpiece, regarding the siege of Palmyra.
Yeah.
Do you think they give legitimacy to extremists in such a way? They quote in their media.
Even if they don't mention their news agencies, they adopt their narrative anyway.
Oh.
But if you look at the technical side of the way ISIS presented itself from the very beginning through the videos and the news and the media in general and the PR, they use a Western technique. Look at it, very sophisticated. How could somebody who's under siege, who's despised all over the world, who's under attack from the airplanes, who the whole world wants to liberate every city from him, could be that sophisticated unless if he's not relaxed and has all the support. So I don't think it's about Amaq. It's about the West adopting their story, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly.
Donald Trump takes over as US president in a few weeks. You mentioned America many times today. What do you expect from America's new administration? His
rhetorics during the campaign were positive regarding the terrorism, which is our priority today. Anything else is not priority. So I wouldn't focus on anything else. The rest is American, let's say, internal matters. I wouldn't worry about. But the question whether Trump have the will or the ability to implement what he just mentioned. You know that most of the mainstream media and the corporate, big corporate, the lobbies, the Congress, even some in his parties were against him. They want to have more hegemony, more conflict with Russia, more interference in different countries, toppling government and so on. He said something in the other direction. Could he sustain against all those after he started next month? That's the question. If he could, I think the world will be in different place, because the most important thing, as I just mentioned earlier, is the relation between Russia and the United States. If he goes toward that relation, most of the tension around the world will be pacified. That's very important for us in Syria. But I don't think anyone has the answer to that. He wasn't a politician, so we don't have any reference to judge him first. Second, nobody can tell what kind of battle is it going to be next month and after.
Humanitarian situation in Syria is disaster. And we hear from EU Foreign Policy Chief, Madame Mogherini, that EU is the only entity to deliver humanitarian aid to Syria. Is that true?
Actually, all the aid that any Western country sent was to the terrorists. To be very clear and very blunt and very transparent, they never cared about single Syrian human life. We have so many cities in Syria till today surrounded by and besieged by the terrorists. They prevented anything to reach them, food, water, anything, all the basic needs of life. Of course, they attack them on a daily basis by mortars and try to kill them. What did the EU send to those if they are worried about the human life? If they talk about the humanitarian aspect, because when you talk about humanitarian aspect or issue, you don't discriminate. All the Syrians are humans. All the people are humans. They don't do that. So this is the double standard. This is the lie that they keep telling, and it's becoming disgusting lie. No one is selling their stories anymore. That's not true. What she mentioned, not true.
Some suggestions say that for Syria, the best solution would be to split into separate countries governed by Sunni, Shia, Kurds. Is it any way possible?
This is the Western, with some regional country, hope or dream. And this is not new, not related to this war. That was before the war, and you had maps for this division and disintegration. But actually, if you look at the society today, the Syrian society is more unified than before the war. This is reality. I'm not saying anything to raise the morale of anyone. I'm not talking to Syrian audience anyway now. I'm talking about the reality. Because of the lessons of the war, the society became more realistic and pragmatic, and many Syrians knew that being fanatic doesn't help. Being extreme in any idea, I'm not only talking about extremism in the religious meaning, politically, socially, culturally, doesn't help Syria. Only when we accept each other, when we respect each other, we can live with each other and we can have one country. So regarding the disintegration of Syria, if you don't have this real disintegration among the society and different shades and the spectrum of the Syrian society fabric, Syrian fabric, you cannot have division. It's not a map you draw. I mean, even if you have one country, while the people are divided, you have disintegration. Look at Iraq. It's one country, but it is disintegrated in reality. So not worry about this. There's no way that Syrians would accept that. I'm talking now about the vast majority of the Syrians, because this is not new. This is not the subject of the last few weeks or last few months. This is the subject of this war. So after nearly 6 years, I can tell you the majority of the Syrians wouldn't accept anything related to disintegration. We're going to live as one Syria.
As a mother, I feel the pain of all Syrian mothers.
Yeah.
Speaking about children in Syria, what does the future hold for them?
This is the most dangerous aspect of our problem, not only in Syria, wherever you talk about this dark Wahhabi ideology, because many of those children who became young during the last decade or more than one decade, who joined the terrorists on ideological basis, not for the lack of money or anything else, or hope, let's say, they came from open-minded families, educated families, intellectual families. So you can imagine how strong the terrorism is.
So that happened because of their propaganda?
Exactly, because the ideology is very dangerous. It knows no borders, no political borders, and the World Wide Web has helped those terrorists using fast and inexpensive tools in order to promote their ideology, and they could infiltrate any family anywhere in the world, whether in Europe, in your country, in my country, anywhere. You have secular.
It's happening.
Exactly, you have secular society. I have secular society, but it didn't protect the society from being infiltrated.
Do you have any counter ideology for this?
Exactly, because they base their ideology on the Islam. So you have to use the same ideology, using the real Islam, the real moderate Islam, in order to counter that ideology. This is the fast way, let's say. If you want to talk about the midterm and long term, it's about how much can you upgrade the society, the way the people analyze and think. Because this ideology can only work when you cannot analyze, when you don't think properly. So it's about the algorithm of the mind. If you have natural, or let's say healthy operating system, if you want to draw analogy to the IT, if we have good operating systems in our mind, they cannot infiltrate it like a virus. So it's about the education, it's about the media, and it's about the policy, because sometimes when you have a cause, national cause, and people lose hope, you can push those people toward being extremists. And this is one of the influence in our region since the 70s, after the war between the Arab and the Israeli, and the peace failed in every aspect to recapture the land, to give the land and the rights to its people. You have more desperation, and that played into the hand of the extremists. And this is where the Wahhabi find fertile soil to promote its ideology.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your time, and I wish your country peace and prosperity, and as soon as possible.
Thank you very much for coming.
This time has been very tough for you.
Thank you very much.
I wish it's going to end soon.
Thank you very much for coming to Syria. I'm very glad to receive you.